Good evening and welcome everyone. My name is William Metalglass and I'm Director of Studies at the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies in Barry, Massachusetts, on land stewarded by the Nipmuc people for countless generations, many of whom continue to live in this area, which was traditionally known as Nipinet. And I'd like to begin with a preliminary announcement. If you're interested in this program tonight, I wanted to let you know that Zenju Osho is offering an online retreat with BCBS at the beginning of May, Friday, May 6th to Tuesday, May 10th, called Shamanic Bones of Zen. So you can find that if you go to our website, buddhistinquiry.org. And I want to give you a brief sense of how our time together will unfold tonight. First, though, let me say that if you like to have closed captions and you'd like to get the text in real time, there's a link to do that on the lower right side of the Zoom picture. It says live transcript with a CC above that, and you can just press that icon. So after my introduction, Zenju Osho will do a short chant as meditation, and then Zenju Osho and Paula will have a conversation. We will then invite questions from participants and conclude with a very brief meditation. And you can pose questions by pressing the Q&A button, which is in the middle of the bar on the bottom of your Zoom screen. And you can feel free to submit questions at any time. The chat function, I believe, is disabled. So if you're having technical difficulties at any point, please feel free to send an email to contact@buddhistinquiry.org. And thank you to my colleague Cassie for making all these logistical processes work so smoothly. So it brings me great joy to introduce Zenju Earthlyn Manuel and Paula Arai. Zenju Osho's teaching is informed by her years participating in Native American and Indigenous African traditions, the Church of Christ in which she was raised, and several different Buddhist traditions, as well as the academic traditions in which she earned her PhD, and the literary traditions in which she participates. For some decades, Zenju Osho has been practicing and teaching in the tradition of Suzuki Roshi in the San Francisco Zen Center, and is the Dharma heir of Blanche Hartman. For many of us, though, we know Zenju Osho through her extraordinary writing. And I think I speak for many of us when I express my gratitude for Zenju Osho for finding a language that opens up a space to hold with tenderness what is both difficult and liberating, and gives voice to pain and suffering, as well as the possibility of peace, with a kind of honesty, vulnerability, care, and wisdom. Hers is the voice of a storyteller and a poet whose affirmation of belonging and peace is so powerful because she's looking at wounding, at the burdens of personal, generational, and social harms. Even the titles of Zenju Osho's books are so beautiful and inspiring to me, and can be helpful words of contemplation. The Way of Tenderness, Awakening to Race, Sexuality, and Gender. Or another one of her books, Sanctuary, a meditation on home, homelessness, and belonging. The Deepest Peace, Contemplations from a Season of Stillness, which is this gorgeous poetic exploration of stillness, silence, and the practice of peace. Just saying the title, I feel a certain groundedness in my body. And I'm also really honored to have Paula Arai with us tonight. Paula is the Urmila Gopal Singhal Professor in Religions of India at the Louisiana State University. And Paula wrote the foreword to Zenju Osho's most recent book, The Shamanic Bones of Zen. And Paula is also one of the leading scholars working on women in Zen. She's the author of, maybe the leading scholar on women in Zen. She's the author of Bringing Zen Home, The Healing Art of Japanese Women's Rituals and Women Living Zen, Japanese Soto-Buddhist Nuns, which is really beautiful, beautiful book. And she's written what is perhaps the most beautiful book in Buddhist studies, or perhaps anywhere, a book called Painting Enlightenment, Healing Visions of the Heart Sutra, which is just an extraordinary book, which I used in a retreat I taught last fall. So after the conversation between Zenju Osho and Paula, there will be an opportunity for questions and reflections. And that will happen through the question and answer function. So Zenju Osho and Paula, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting and opening up the doors or the Zoom at Berry Center for Buddhist Studies. And thank you, Paula Arai, for accepting invitation to sit with me to this evening and to talk and to have conversation. So before we get started, I would like to offer a chant for the well-being of those, maybe if you think about those in your life, your family, those in your community that need healing, who are suffering. Think of their names. And then also think about all the things that are going on in the world that you would like to put attention to right now in this moment. And to trust that what you are sending out will be reached, will be felt, and will be received. And so the chant is Enmei Juku Kananyo. And I'm going to do the chant and get us going here for today, and then we'll come back and have a conversation. Okay. Enmei Juku Kananyo Kanze Anamu Wasayo Wasayo Wasu enbu poso enjo rakagajo shonin kanzea bonin kanzea nennen jishinki nennen furishin kanzea namu butsuyo butsu enyo butsu enbu poso enjo rakagajo shonin kanzea bonin kanzea nennen jushinki nennen furishin kanzea namu butsuya butsu enya butsu en buposo enjo rakagaja shanin kanzea bonin kanzea nennen jishinki nennen furishin kanzea namu butsuya butsu enya butsu en buposo enjo rakagaja shanin kanzea bonin kanzea nennen jishinki nennen furishin kanzea namu butsuya butsu enya butsu en buposo enjo rakagaja shanin kanzea bonin kanzea nennen jushinki nennen furishin kanzea namu butsuya butsu enya butsu en buposo enjo rakagaja shanin kanzea bonin kanzea nennen jishinki nennen furishin kanzea namu butsuya butsu enya butsu en buposo enjo rakagaja shonin kanzea bonin kanzea nennen jishinki nennen furishin kanzea namu butsuya butsu enya butsu en buposo enya yakagaja shonin kanzea bonin kanzea nennen jushinki nennen furishin. May we awaken Buddha's healing love after having chanted the Enmei Juku Kananyo. And we dedicate the merit and virtue of this loving kindness to the ancestors of those who live upon the lands that we lived on, who lived there before we got there, to those ancestors whose shoulders we stand upon, and to all of those in our lineage of our bloodline, our spiritual line, everything that brought us to this moment right here together right now, and to all sentient beings, not just human. And so we offer this chant today throughout the world for all of those who are in need of healing, who are currently in the dying process, are suffering in any way. May they be well. May they be well all the days of their lives and hereafter. Okay. There we go. So, greetings, Paula. So everybody just sit with that too. Allow that drum. It was a bakugyo, for those who've never seen this. It's a fish drum, bakugyo. And the bell over there, big bell. Yes, we're going to talk about all of these things. These are the things that encouraged me to continue Buddhist practice. And they encouraged me because I was very familiar with the drum. I'm very familiar. The bell is a drum too. It's just a metal drum. And the chanting and the rhythm, of what's needed to bring what we want to bring into the world. And so you're trying to get in sync with the rhythm of the earth. And this is what has brought me here and into this practice that has kept me alive. So it's brought me here to this moment. And it's in every gateway that I have been in, every practice, every ceremony that I have been in has been a drum, has been rhythm, has been chanting, has been movement to bring about all that we want to see in this world and in this life. And so that what we want to see is in alignment with the earth. So sometimes what we want to see is not, but what we want to see is in alignment with the rhythm of the earth, with the drum and with the bell. So I want to have this great conversation tonight. I was telling them when I invited Paula wrote the foreword to the book, The Shamanic Bones of Zen. She wrote the foreword. And I was very happy. I didn't think I was going to even be able to find anybody to do such a thing, or if anybody wanted to. And I said, oh, yeah, Paula. Because we have met and have talked so much about practice, Zen practice and Buddhist practice. And when we talk on the phone, we're on the phone for like 2-3 hours. So then, so we have a lot to say, and we enjoy exploring. And so that's exactly what I'm doing in all of my books, are exploring. And I'm so happy that I've been invited to write these books, that I haven't had to really go out and say, like write something and then try to shop it. I that probably has been for one of my books, which is finally coming out, a novel, but not these. For these, the gate's been wide open. So I'm inviting Paula into conversation today. And before we do that, I wanted to read one thing actually from The Deepest Peace, which is one of the books. Because the deepest peace, now why would you read about the deepest peace when we're here to talk about the shamanic bones of Zen? Well, all of my books, if one very astute interviewer saw the evolution of the books in the building up of the teachings that I wanted to bring. And so I was very happy that they saw it. Not that one's lower than the other, but they are a building, and I'm still building. So I hope to be well enough and alive enough to, be here, to do all the other books if there are any more. So I just want to read this one paragraph, actually, and it's in the last chapter of the book, because it's actually, I'm walking out in the on the earth in this very vast land where I was living in New Mexico, up north, when I lived up north, and just feeling and into this voice and seeing in my vision, this woman talking to me about fire, and I just kept going with that idea of fire and tending to the fires. So I'm just going to read this one paragraph. The fire of our existence is a perpetual fire that was lit long before any of us came to earth. We have no knowledge of how it was lit. We have no knowledge of how we are here. An ember of this fire was placed inside each of us. The constant burning and light of this first fire is life. This fire, if not attended to, burns out and life is lost. This fire, if not attended to, burns out and life is lost. This flame of life exists within peace. The fire doesn't go out in the presence of peace. And so that was the message I got from the vision of this woman when I was walking out. She was an indigenous woman of Africa. I could just see that, and the feeling of her. She was tending to something in the earth. And I feel like I saw her, and that's what came out. That's what came through. And so just sharing that as an actual, experience, I think that is opened up from my practice in the Dharma and other rituals, and being rooted in ancestral practice and earth-based wisdom practices. So, when I called Paula, I knew that she had already written a book on Zen women and healing, and we talked about different healing traditions that they had. But I just mainly knew that she would understand, that she wouldn't think of that I had lost my mind writing about, Shamanic Bones of Zen, because I had already heard her teach, and I had read her work. And so I knew that she would understand how this works in practice. And there are a lot of academic books about shamanism in Buddhism, and mostly about Tibetan Buddhism, but Zen does have its place there too. And it's not written about and not talked about as much, but it is felt. I talked to many teachers, and so I'm not out here completely on my own. This book was endorsed by many Zen teachers that their endorsements did not make it into the book. We lost a page in the printing process. So anyway, Paula, just wanted to invite you to speak about, the book and what you found, that resonated with you, so that you could write the foreword. You could say you want to write a foreword to a book, then you read it and you go, uh-oh, I said yes. So what do you think, Paula? Tell us.
Well, first, I'm so grateful, so profoundly honored that you thought of turning to me, and the energy that you generate. I'm just thrilled to be able to feel your energy, to be in your orbit. And you give voice, as you were saying, you give voice to, I think, what is the heart of Zen practice. It's not on the fringes or marginal or somehow added on top. It is the core, and it is the hardest part to teach and to transmit, because it must be felt in the whole body mind. And if you're in an environment where no one is tuned in, they can't hear the frequencies going out.
Yeah.
And so, my work on the lived tradition of Zen on the ground, the part that's not in the texts, I mean, that's what it's all about. And so to hear you write about it in English has been wonderful for me, to see someone trying to articulate it. And the way you place it in stories, your own experiences, that's how it happens. And so you're offering this portal, this access to the heart of Zen. And I was so deeply moved reading it, crying, and usually I'm checking off my to-do lists, and I thought, okay, I read the book, now I'm going to write the forward. There was so much resonating for a few weeks before I could even find one word, because it was so rich. And it was like, how, I think of Dogen, don't put legs on a snake. I was like, I don't want to add legs to this. It flows. It's so beautiful. So thankfully, in my 2 weeks of trying to figure out what in the world, how to even approach something, because it was sacred. How do I approach something so sacred? And thankfully, I happened to watch the documentary on the elephants, and I thought, that's it. That's it. The elephants know that, it was, in that case, it was quite literally bones, passing the bones to teach. And of course, the Zen metaphor of, you've got the flesh and, the bone and then the marrow. And I just thought, yes, Zenju has captured the marrow, and so beautifully. And it's so necessary in our world. People are afraid of, New Age, as if somebody's spirituality can be thin. I mean, we're all exploring, we're all experimenting. And so you tying that, bringing the depth to life, articulating it, that offering is so rich. I'm so grateful that you had the courage to write that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, thank you for that. I felt your excitement in the introduction too, and I love the story about the elephant, and because I really love elephants and who they are and what they are, and some great beasts. Sometimes I call animals people. Some great people that have been around much longer than us. So they know, they know the earth. They know how to be on it, how to move on it, and what natural rituals, like you said, moving the bones, very natural rituals. And I think a lot of spiritual paths have this natural ritual and ceremony. We may not call it that necessarily, but it's there, and it's transmission. And so the transmission is not that we're trying to cook up something, that is going to be magical, but just doing what is in alignment, with the earth, and coming back to that and stirring that and making it the practice, And so some of these rituals, one of the ones I liked that we were talking about one time about, there was a ritual, and the women took the ritual and brought it into their house, where they started, and you're going to have to correct me, started putting names. They took a ritual from the Zen temple and made it their own within their homes, and did it as groups with women. So you have so many examples of women doing Zen ritual that you all must look at that book, and also and reading it in tandem with the Shamanic Bones of Zen, because you'll get some actual other kind of rituals that aren't going on necessarily in Western Zen communities. So could you tell a little bit more about that? And then I wanted to talk about the umbilical cord ritual.
Well, so I'm sorry, I'm not totally clear which one ritual with the names you're talking
Well, anyone you want to share. Yeah.
Well,
women.
Yeah. So some of my favorite things that the women do is they tailor, they have this whole like repertoire, they have all different kinds of elements of ritual. And what I was fascinated by, it was when they took the pieces of rituals that are in formal temples and then tailored them to suit what their actual needs were at the moment. And so they're mixing and matching and creating their own versions with a fluidity and a confidence. Actually, it was the confidence, I think, that struck me so deeply. And perhaps my all-time favorite one is, how Zen is all about keeping things clean. And so dusting and keeping your altar really clean is a sign of being, good Zen Buddhist. And this one woman had the formal ritual, the formal home altar for her husband's family out in the living room, and she made one for her own family. And women usually don't have their own ritual for their own family, but she did. And she felt overwhelmed. She felt no one understood her. She felt she needed support, didn't know where to turn. And so she turned to her ancestors in her altar, thinking they will understand. And so her ritual was to not dust her altar, knowing they will understand I can't do everything, and that there's someone who's going to accept me without judgment, without ridicule. And so to blatantly not dust, I thought that was brilliant. And so that's what I learned most about, there are all kinds of rituals, but the phenomenon of tailoring it to your needs, that's something I would love to see more people have the confidence to do that. And your book gives them a lot of rich material to work with.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything else? Because I kind of just threw that one out at you, but there might be something else you want to talk about too. So I want to.
I don't mind getting to the umbilical cord.
Okay, the umbilical cord. So I don't know, folks who have read the book, I don't know how many people have read the story, but there's a story in there. Hoitsu Suzuki Roshi, the son of Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, who founded the San Francisco Zen Center, Hoitsu had come for a ceremony at Zen Center, and it was a memorial for his sister, and we were all gathered in the Buddha hall. Everybody kind of came in. There's a way of coming in, and that's part of the ritual, how you move, how you walk to what you're about to enact, what you're going to be in. You walk in a way to get there, so that when you're there, by the time you get there, your heart's open, your body's open, and everybody's ready for the ritual. And so everyone had gotten in, and then all of a sudden, Huisa's like, whoa, wait, he stops the whole ritual, which is always very disconcerting in Zen centers because they have it all written down and what's next, what's next, what's next. But I loved it because like spirit bumped in and said, no, we're going to stop when Hoitsu said, I have this thing. So he brings out this little box, little black box, and it's a little lacquer box. And I'm like, oh, I'm very interested. Like, what is that? He brings it out. He's going like that and pointing to the altar, like, pointing to the altar. So the translator says, like, what is it? He's trying to get him to understand this must go on the altar. And then everyone's kind of like giggling and laughing. The whole thing is held up, the whole ceremony. And I'm like, like, let him put it on the altar, because they're used to this, it only could be this, it only can be that. But he was of the tradition, which is a tradition we think we're in and doing, of adding this piece to the altar, which we were not aware of this, right? It hadn't been transmitted to us Westerners. And so they finally, they opened it up and closed it back. And boy, I was so interested. So they put it on the altar and went on with the ceremony. Later on, there was food in the back after the ceremony. And then I rushed behind Hoitsu, knowing I couldn't speak a bit of Japanese, but I rushed behind them and I was like, I want to talk to you about the box. And so they translated it for me. And then then I realized, oh no, I'm at the Japanese speaking table, where they're supposed to be eating. And here I am interrupting, so I was like, oh no. I said, oh, sorry. And then they were like, all the women were like, sit down, sit down, sit down. So I sat down with the Japanese speaking, and in Zen, the tables are very marked of who should sit where. And here I was sitting at the Japanese speaking table. So I sat down and I started asking about that box, and he opened it up, and, the translator was going on talking for me, and he opens up this little piece of cloth, and I'm looking at it, and he puts it in my hand, this little thing that looked like a dried up worm. He puts it in my hand, and I'm like, oh, what did I ask? What did I ask for? And then he said, this is the umbilical cord of her mother, of their mother, their sister's mother. So he said, everyone in the home has these little black lacquer boxes that are umbilical cords of the mothers. The lineage, of the mothers, the ancestral lineage is on the altar in these little boxes of, mother, grandmother, great grandmother, great great grandmother, great great grandmother, and grandmother. And like, oh my gosh, I was so enthralled. I wanted to know more. I said, I know there's more to this practice. Some of it could be considered culturally just Japanese, but I knew it was part of the practice, and I was so elated, and I sat there, I stayed at the table at 8, and, of course, did a lot of smiling because I didn't know what they were talking about, but Hoitsu never forgot me from that point on. Every time he would see me in the Zen Center, even if it was a year later or 2 years later, he would just bow because he just enjoyed me being of interest in that. And so that began my journey of wanting to know a little bit more about what didn't get transmitted. And then in the book, I make some assumptions about, maybe not wanting to do those rituals and ceremonies so deeply because they may be culturally Japanese, or they weren't transmitted because maybe they weren't sure we can, as Westerners, hold the deep rituals and ceremonies that they have. There was a way of trying to get Buddhism to be a part of Western world, like Christianity was dominant. And so bringing in another religion and to bring in all the shamanic bones of the practice might have made it hard. I don't know. These are all my assumptions, and I do talk about them up front in the book. And so I even asked you, Paula, I said, why don't people write about it? And why do even the academics, they write about it very academically, but no one really comes out and says, this is shamanic in its elements. And I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by shamanic in the elements, but later. Hopefully we'll get it. If I don't, ask the question. But I really began to even see all the rituals and all the ceremonies differently, or it affirmed what I felt and saw. It was a confirmation.
Yeah. Well, I just love that story. And a quick answer to why it's not written about much academically is because it requires an intimacy and not being tone deaf to those vibrations.
Mm,
And
mm,
most it's not in a text written about, and so then you're on then you have to go talk to people, and you have to build relationships of trust, which takes years and years to develop. And most people, it's hard to put in that level of time and develop that level of trust. But so what going back to the umbilical cord, when I read that, I just thought, yes, there it is, that Dogen's teachings, all existence are Buddha nature. And so that it was hard for me not to see this umbilical cord of a mother preserved in a box to be any different from a Buddha relic, and which, has, 2,500 years of this tradition of Buddha relics, and they keep proliferating. And so clearly, the Buddha's body is expansive. And that women, there's been a question, can women be Buddhas? Well, I don't know. I think the women who cut the umbilical cords and saved them and passed them on, they knew they didn't need anyone's permission to do that. They didn't need to ask. They knew in their bones who they were. And that's the thing I've found. Yes, institutions and rules are quite against women, but those are the men's institutions and men's rules. So if you go right to the women, you find a lot more going on. So I just think here we have it. They've created their own relics from their own bodies, on par with Buddha relics. And I just thought that, and brings the Buddha present now. And it makes us, in a sense, all Buddhas, all progeny of Buddhas, and that we beget Buddhas. So can I share, this is maybe not the best segue, but from Painting Enlightenment, I'll share one image because it asks the question, who are my ancestors? So let me put the painting up on the screen that you can watch while I'll just recite this one poem that I think is in harmony with the Shamanic Bones of Zen. This painting's entitled Mandala of Evolution. Who are my ancestors? Descendant of lightning, hydrogen atoms from the dawn of the universe aerate my lungs. Iron traces of stellar explosions course through my veins. The regenerative power of starfish fuels my creativity. The adventurous courage of amphibians quickens my gait. Begat from paramecium and ginkgo trees, my great-great-grandfather, an amoeba. My grandmother, a cherry blossom. I will become rain. So for me, that poem and your book, it's tapping into that same marrow of the Zen tradition.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it. I just start smiling immediately at the first verse stanza. I love poetry, but that's the essence of it when you're talking about ancestors. And I actually think in this book that I write about this tree, right, that had these yellow flowers, and then really realizing that I was an ancestor of the flowers and the tree and of the bees, everything that was happening there. Before was just this tree and a flower, till I sat there long enough with my feet, on the ground, in the grass, bare feet. Every time I go to the park, I like to take my shoes off and just feel. And I was in it. That's what came up, like, oh my God, I'm an heir of this tree.
Yeah.
I'm an heir of all this yellow. I'm an heir of the bees, of all of this. And that is just such an expansive view, and also a teaching. This is why being on the earth is so important. It's a teaching of our interrelationship to everything and everyone. Now, that's not to say we don't have problems with each other, about how we think and how we move and our perspectives of life, and what trees get to live and what trees get chopped down. And there's this hierarchy on trees, especially in California. Redwoods are king queens. So what actually, when we're talking about ancestors, goes so far, and wide. And also there is that relative place, of our blood ancestors. So I always invite people who struggle with that, with the blood ancestors, to still, invoke their name. They were alive and they're alive within you. So like even in our spiritual practice in Zen, we chant, to the ancestors. We are acknowledging, the teachings and the wisdom and the lineage of it, and in that acknowledgement, all of that has been a struggle within those lineages. Even don't think they didn't struggle with each other. Because Vashu Banzu was a real something, there were these teachers that all of them, they weren't just these people that we just read on paper, so these teachers from old, and even if they're not in the lineage, just in the world, that they were human beings. Buddha was a human being. His, the people that came out with him to the forest, were, when he finally ate, they were upset with him because they're like, whoa, I thought we were on this, journey and we weren't going to eat, and here you are, so they didn't understand that, and so there was a struggle, and especially when Buddha said, I am the awakened one, they were like, wow. And so he had to change that, and to, there is suffering. And that grounded, it began to ground his teachings. And so, and I've been talking a lot about, I'm going to make that list of those trees that he sat upon, the different trees, and how the teachings came through him, through his dreaming, through his being. Oh. He didn't think the teachings, and there are books. The Living Buddha is one of them that has a list of all the trees that he sat on, because he believed in that. He believed in tree spirit, which in Tibetan Buddhism, they do, speak of that and have rituals of tree spirits, and them being usually, of the feminine power. The trees are considered that. I think they call it yakshinis or yakshinis. Yeah. I'd have to look it up. I'm not quite sure. I was just learning about it from Lama Sostrom. So, yeah.
And the Buddha, in one of the Jataka tales, as a bodhisattva Buddha to be, one incarnation was as a tree spirit.
Yeah. So, you were also talking before we got started about bowing. And I think that I remember when I first started practicing Buddhism in a Nichiren tradition, there was a lot of bowing, and I was like, Oh, I don't know if I want to do that, because I definitely related it to submission and being a person of African descent and the history of bowing, of slaves bowing to the master. That's what came to mind. And so I was very rigid about it, and did it if I had to, like say I was up in front, but not with full heart. I didn't understand what that was. And so eventually I just did the action of it, the action of the bowing. And in that I realized I wasn't bowing to the person in front of me, and that I was bowing. It wasn't in the place of slavery. I was a slave and they were my master. When I could reduce that story and see the bowing as acknowledging and recognizing the ancestors, and the ancestors of those who may be in front of me when I'm bowing. And so even recognizing, acknowledging the ancestor of the earth. And so like Thich Nhat Hanh calls it touching the earth. When you're bowing, you're touching the earth. And then there's a statue of Buddha where one hand is up. Sometimes it's up. I don't know if you see up like this. Sometimes he's like this. But I have the one where I think I have both of my statues of Buddha. It's touching when one hand is down over the leg and one hand is up here by his hara center. Dantian is touching the earth. And because when he touched the earth, that's when he saw everything and he heard the cries of the world. And there's just so many shamanic experiences. So let me say what that is really quickly. Awakening, to me, they're awakening experiences where everything just opens up and you don't even understand here in your mind what is happening, but everything opens up and you can see things differently. You knew the sky was blue, but it's a different feeling about that blue sky, or when you touch the earth, you knew you were a person, but there's a different feeling about even that. Like that seems so limiting in that moment when you actually touch the earth or you actually bow. And we were talking about bowing a lot, right? Just before we got on. And I was talking about the bows I had to do, was invited to do in Dharma transmission and how many there were. And I invited people in my Sangha to join me in those bows every day for like weeks. And they brought soup and bread, so it was this wonderful time to me. I'll never forget it. But I remember bowing once by myself in my house. And realizing, it felt like my eyes opened for the first time. Like I was born and I opened my eyes and it was like, I was surprised, that like I looked at a tree that was outside my window, like I never had seen the tree before. And realized in that moment that that's what birth is, the opening of the eyes, and it was powerful. It was a powerful moment. And I think I write about that as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you want to speak to bowing too? That's it.
Yeah. So bowing, I mean, your story and the transformation you had to go through to bow, seeing beyond the bows that had been done in submission historically, and still even to this day, that burden is a powerful, it's powerful. And so to transform, so that's more intense than me bowing. I too have come to see it as it's a reconditioning of experience, where if you're bowing in gratitude, at the same time, you are making yourself very vulnerable, because someone can come up behind you you can't see. You know, those of us who have sight, we're giving it up to bow. And so to experience gratitude and connecting to all kinds of beings, to the earth, that is, to me, the quintessential shamanic ritual. It's the core shamanic ritual, is bowing, where, you know, it's also the most ubiquitous in the Buddhist tradition. If you look at all the rituals done, the one that everybody shares is bowing. They may bow differently, but everyone bows. And, you know, it helps move you from being closed off to being open, because to let yourself be vulnerable, you have to trust that the conditions are such that it's okay, you're safe to bow. And so instead of being closed and fearful, you're open and trusting. And instead of being alone, you see how reliant you are on all these other beings. And so I think there is more to learn from bowing practice. There's more each of us can do in our own homes or together, and that what you described so well is the shamanic bones of Zen. You can access it through bowing and gratitude.
Yeah, you can. And it, you know, and it's a lineage to it. Like I've been telling folk, and it's in the book too, that the bones are that there were other practices in place before many of the people took on Buddhism in the various, you know, it reminded me in the various countries, Asian countries. And it reminds me of when the people, the slaves took on Christianity. So they brought in the African traditions into it, you know, and that's the same thing that, to me, that's in Buddhism. So in some way, Buddhism is more of the, you know, even though it feels like in this country it's not a dominant practice, is a dominant, it wasn't dominant to the people who were there, became that in some places. Although some places still hold on to the Shinto, the Taoism, and the Shingon, which are the more, you know, I say shamanic practices that didn't come here, right? I mean, some are here, very small, a little bit, definitely not Shinto. So, because I think I would have gone into Shinto, but I think, you know, that you need to know the language is so much of the earth, and it's not translatable, I don't think, and transmissible. So we got a few more minutes, and I got a signal that might be good to do some Q&A, and I think it is good to do that, but I just wanted to throw that in. There's so much we could talk about, and we're going to talk about more of this in May of the, I think it's 4 evenings of the talking about shamanic bones of Zen, and maybe we can do some, I think, some exercises so we can, I think, feel into some of the openings. And some, you know, doesn't have to be anything big other than the chanting itself. Hopefully you felt something, you know, and what you felt, that's it. That's what it is. That's the opening. That's the vastness. That's the touching of, you know, of the earth. So we're going to keep talking, but we'll talk to you. You know, what are your questions?
Thanks so much, Zenju Osho and Paula. And if anybody has questions, now's a good time to put it in the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You can see Q&A. And the first question that came in was from a guest student manager at the San Francisco Zen Center. And there was recently a guest student who was wondering about the chants and thought they were a little bit there was a monotone. Mm-hmm. And this person was thinking they might be dry, and the person posing the question was wondering how you might respond to that.
Yeah, they are. They're meant to be exactly as you heard them. And that everyone's voice is in a monotone, in a oneness together. No one's standing out over the other. And to someone's, if you compare it to other things, then it can't be what it is. It's a comparison. So I sing, I'm a singer, I sing Lakota songs. I dare not compare those to chanting Zen. They're completely different and they espouse different aspects of one's life. So it's a tone. There are some Tibetan singing, Mongolian singing is kind of in the throat. You know, there are different, everyone has a different way of bringing it. It's not always a song, which is the way, that is the kind of the dominant thinking around Buddhism and voice and chanting. It should sound this way if it's a chant. That's that you learn that. But if you go into various ceremonies, song and chanting are different according to what the ceremony is to bring about. So bringing about an interrelationship and everyone's voice being as one. Now I could, really probably float on top of those because I'm a singer. I sing alto. I know how to do 4-part harmony, but then so what? Somebody else doesn't. They never sung before. They never chanted. How do they participate? Do they have to go and learn, how to go to choral school, to learn how to be a part? But then, and I love other chants, like I like the Tibetan chanting sometimes, and it's very monotone. It can be monotone a lot. Or they have a few songs, and I like that. Thich Nhat Hanh, they sing all the time, and so it's because that's of the culture of Vietnam too. It fits the culture. And so Zen is Japanese, mostly Korean, or, different places where you're hearing that sense of oneness. And there's a sense of, even though there's still multiplicity in there of that oneness, you can't quite hear it, but we're coming together so that even when we're chanting, we're doing zazen. So everybody's doing the same thing. And then when you get tired of chanting, you drop a syllable, somebody else's voice lifts that up and brings that together. You're doing it together. Now, if you're singing and you're up here and you drop that tone, it would be a big hole in that chanting, because if your voice would just like, whoa, what happened to that high note person? So it's just one even tone, but it's meant. But what does it bring to your body? And do you suffer it? Are you suffering it because of comparison? And can you experience it in just as it is, and see what it does to you? How you feel, what comes up, what comes through, other than if it's agitation because you're in judgment or you're in comparison mode. Because everywhere you go, it's different. Everywhere. I've been a few places where the chanting is quite different. Yeah. And I love them all. I love all of it. All of it.
You're not the only one who loves it. Someone, Doug from Massachusetts, wrote in the chat that they loved the chant and they were wondering where they could find more. Maybe we could send that out to everyone who was registered if they're interested.
If you get the audio book, I'm chanting on it.
The audio book of Shamanic Bones.
All the chants I'm chanting. I'm not reading the book. An actress, they always get act, but I am doing the chanting in the book. That's written in the book. So you can get that, or you can get it on the San Francisco Zen Center website. I thought, Paula, you were getting ready to say something.
Yeah, well, I so appreciate what you said about the kind of the monotone, monotonous nature of Zen chanting, and how we all then become this one voice. And it also, to me, I've always thought of it, because I love music and, going all over the place, I think is wonderful. But the monotonous nature makes it almost like a heartbeat, and everyone gets in tune with the beat. And the power that is generated when you are in sync with a group, chanting, or even if you're chanting by yourself, it's like you can be joined more easily. It's not a performance. It's an activating the heart energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, next question.
So there are a couple of questions that have to do with practices for ancestral healing. One, after expressing their gratitude, wondering about sharing any rituals or ceremonies that might help with ancestral healing. And another that's related is about practices that might send healing energy to one's ancestors, and from someone who has been doing this, but it has raised issues in her family and has been very difficult because it has brought up things that they may not want to be thinking about and has led to separation. And I'm wondering if you could say something about that.
So one thing we do with ancestors is we continue to give them their rap sheet as they go out the door. They have their rap sheet. You know, sorry, guy, I remember you when you were here. And they're not those people in that place. They're not people at all. They're spirits. And the healing is you. The healing is you. And when you chant, that's why I like chanting, because that's the easiest ritual to do, to send out to every being, every sentient being. And because you're doing that, it also is being held and affected by those who have been here, hopefully. This is the idea. And so I'm not here to talk about different rituals and ceremonies of other practices. I'm talking about Zen. And so for me to go out and talk about, okay, you can do this to heal your lineage, is not what I'm writing about. Other people have written about it. They may have some idea about how to do it. I have done some of that outside of, let's say, Zen, but everything I do, that my whole life, spiritual life, and dedicating myself to a path will heal not only me, but my ancestors and everybody, hopefully, around me, just by my presence. You know, and so it's not like it's something I need to do, but something I am to be in the healing energy, as always, is to help others and myself and ancestors, and on and on and on and on. Just an energy. Remember the rhythm, the vibration goes out, 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 out. It doesn't just hit here. Like when I went like this, it didn't just stop right here in my house. It went to you and it went out, 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 out. The bell, out, 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 out. When you hear the bell, don't you think that my ancestors are smiling? I know they are when they hear that bell. It's right by them. I know they know. I know they are right here. And it could be anything. It could be my drum, my Congolese drums. It could be those. So sound and rhythm, I think, is part, because they are now of the earth. They're of the earth. So, and they're not the people, you know. So the healing that needs to go on is within, you know, you, the ancestors are within you. So when you're doing the healing, you're right there. You know, the healing work you're to do, you know, whatever that looks like. And it has no achievement or accomplishment. So who here is healed? I'm gonna leave that question right where it is. Who here is healed?
So if I could chime in too, from the Japanese Zen women's ritual life, it's not limited to the women, but that I realized, so ancestors are chanted to, offered food, along with the Buddha in their home altars. And even the deceased is referred to as Honorable Buddha. And so I realized what's happening is when someone passes away, they become a personal Buddha to the it doesn't necessarily have to be a family member, but who's putting that person in their altar. Um, and being a personal Buddha means that then they know all of you and are not judging you, not criticizing you. All the old, buttons that used to get pushed in interactions with that person, they're all gone. And so you can turn to them and they hear you, they understand you, and they respond with love and wisdom. And this happens in the quiet of someone's home. And so what Zenju was saying, that it's they're not people anymore. And the healing comes within, where even the word healing, I don't know how to quite explain it quickly in English, but it's not a cause-effect understanding of healing among the Japanese Zen women I worked with. It is a way of being, a healing mode of being. And you don't do this to get that. You do this because this is the healing way of living.
Yeah, that's what you do. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the ancestors are supporting you living in a healing mode. And so to heal your ancestors, it's like they're already liberated from all this suffering and the nonsense that generated the suffering. And so focus on now and how to behave now, not worrying, oh, did I do something enough to heal them? That's kind of not the question. It's what am I doing now? How am I generating a healing waves of energy around me now?
I think what you're both saying is really powerful and may speak to this next, may have already addressed this next question, but what happens when your ancestors were abusive? How does one think about ancestral practice and connection?
Right. So this is what we just spoke to. You're right, and it's something you have to deal with, and getting help in dealing with it. It's inside your body, and so they're still your ancestors. They're still, you cannot go back and cut those people out of your lineage. It's impossible. It's just kind of like you are who you are when you came into the world, and to start cutting out things of yourself is to cut out your life. So I did realize when people say, okay, let's invoke our ancestors, there was a bunch of folks I left out. And, when I would invoke them. And one day I heard this voice say, hey, what about me? Because I had this whole group of people who my mother said, stay away from them. They're bad, they did this, they did that. They didn't do anything to me directly, but they were considered bad, the bad part of the family. And I wouldn't invoke them. And then I started invoking their names. And it was just a powerful expression of love and compassion, on my part, for me, love and compassion for myself. Because the things I began to see them in myself, because they're in you. Even if you think they're out there and they did this horrible thing, they're in you and it's connected. And so you have to see it within yourself because they're gone. And if you're working with something that's gone, I think you'll suffer personally. I do divinations with people with my oracle that I talk about in the book. And I remember one of the first people say, I want a reading. And I was like, oh no, I can't do a reading for you, because this person was like, why would they come to me? We had our, troubled interactions and relationship. And I was like, okay, they wanted it. And so I did. I made the sanctuary. I sat down, I did just like, you're going to do this for this person. And I started doing the reading and began to weep through it because suddenly I saw the person in a way I had never seen them before. And I knew them for many years and I had never seen that about them, and it was just an affirmation and a confirmation that there is always something so much more, so much more than what we see and know, of the people and the condition, and what suffering caused that suffering to cause you to suffer. What suffering that they got wounded that kept going, going into your life too. And what suffering are you, bringing along too because of that wounding and suffering to yourself and others. So I really began to immediately in that reading with that friend. I didn't strike up a whole new relationship with that person, but it did. I struck up, let's say, a spiritual relationship connection to the person, which I never had before. And that's what readings do for me. They're very mutual. They're not always just about the other person. So I think that this kind of one-on-one dynamic, learning about trauma. Trauma is a fodder. I call it mud. The mud that each of us have, and what nutrients are in your mud to feed your life, which is your lotus. It's going to be mud as long as you're alive. There's going to be mud, and then you're the lotus, the flower. What nutrients are there? There's no way out unless you do something to yourself. There's no way out of the disruptions, the hurt and the pain, the joy, all of it. You can get help. I always say get professional help. I always get professional help for people who do that work to help you even do your practice. Some people come to practice and they haven't done some of the work they need to do to prepare to come to practice. They want a teacher and they haven't done any work. They're just going to come and dump it on the teacher. They're like, here I am, or, all messed up. Go, where you are. Go do your work. It's not messed up. It's just that you had some curves. So go understand those curves a little bit. And so when you're walking with the teacher, those things aren't in the way. When you're singing and chanting to your ancestors, they're not in the way. I lived in violence, and here I am. I lived in violence directed to me in my family, and here I am. And I acknowledge my ancestors. I acknowledge that person. Because if I didn't, I couldn't be here with you. I would have nothing to teach, nothing to give. I'm gonna leave it right there.
Well, your metaphor of this is the mud and what nutrients are in my mud. Sometimes I think my nutrients aren't potent enough. Other people have suffered more. And so I don't maybe have enough juice to draw on. And I had thought that for a long time, most of my life, seeing how privileged my life was. So I kept asking for more suffering, and so I could have richer nutrients. And then finally I thought, I don't need to ask for more. They do just start appearing. And so I've released myself from feeling like my mud isn't dirty enough. And that each of us do, if we go back through our ancestors, none of us are cordoned off from all kinds of suffering that has occurred across this planet. And all of us are part of that. And so to try and feel those connections, that's what helped me see my mud is plenty muddy, because I am connected to all that mud. And so each of us will transform that mud in our unique ways, our distinct ways. And so it's about, yes, what are we going to feed with our nutritious mud? Which part of us are we going to feed? And so I don't know the title yet, but I actually am working on a book. I don't know if we've talked about Zenju. I think we have. Of a book, might be titled something about Zen healing, blossoming in the mud or something. Anyway,
yeah,
I want to talk with you more about that.
Okay, let's talk about it. Because I think that, the people talk a lot about trauma, and there's nobody that isn't traumatized. There's nobody that has not suffered. No one. There's death, illness, discrimination, oppression. Someone says something to you and you still believe it 50 years later about yourself. It could be so many things. And, I sat and wondered too, why is it that we suffer so much? And I asked myself, I said, I feel like I've suffered more than anybody now. I feel like my mud is really, really thick, real thick. I don't even see a lotus could even grow in this mud. And I do, I've had some, incredible, extreme experience, things you see on TV has happened to me. It doesn't look like it, but it has. I've been assaulted in the street 2 times. Okay, 2 or 3 times I've been assaulted. I've been at the police station, so you can't see all of that. So what is this? What is this life? We come in and then it might happen right away. The doctor spanks us. They don't do it anymore, thank God. But we spank the baby, trying to get the baby's lungs open. What is this life then? And what are we here to do? So I started taking, I realized I was suffering the suffering, and I began to use what I suffer. I still use what I suffer. You are reading some of the results of how I use what I suffer. I like to write about it, think about it, talk about it, explore it with others, what this life is. And so this life is, the greatest teachers have suffered the most sometimes. Think about Thich Nhat Hanh. He suffered. He lost all of his friends. They were killed. People he knew. And then he was exiled. Now, what if someone came to your door and said, excuse me, you have to leave right now? And we're taking you to somewhere you've never been. They don't even speak your language. And he used it. He used the nutrients and created the largest Buddhist order in the Western world, in the world. His own Buddhist order. Like, wow, who has done that? I mean, some have, but not to that degree. So that's a great example, a Buddhist example. There are so many examples, of people. Angela Davis, different people have shown us, that that all the mud, all the disruption can be used, is to be used. And for us to see and to understand the nature of life. So that's why we have to remain engaged with life, engaged with the world. We don't go off and just be silent and meditate only. We go out and engage the world. We engage our friends, our family, everything, to see ourselves If you're running, you're escaping, you're trying to escape life, but you could go live in the mountains, and who comes lives with you? A mountain lion. You know, so you just don't get away. There's something in the mountains too, you know, so yeah, thank you for the question. Another one. We got a chance for another one?
Yeah, there's maybe one more question. I also wanted to say, sometimes when people hear the talk about ancestors, they don't think it's really also about Theravada or Southeast Asian Buddhism, but it also permeates Southeast Asian Buddhism. And there's even a sutta in the Pali Canon about how to take care of your ancestors. It's the outside the gate sutta, and the best way to do it is not to give them offerings of food, but it's to act morally, to act skillfully, very similar to what the two of you were saying before, just to tie that into another tradition.
How you're acting, how you're being. Yeah.
Yeah. So there may be time for one more question. There was a question about if shamanism is about entering into a state of altered consciousness, and maybe there are other ways of defining shamanism that might be different than that. The question is, can you speak a little bit more about, if that is what shamanism is about, what role that has in Buddhist practice, in the practice of Zen in particular?
So oftentimes I think we see altered state as this big thing where our minds are totally gone. But like I said, did you feel a little bit different after I was chanted? After I chanted, you came on, if you were here, and you heard the chanting, and then afterwards there was a moment. And that moment, you probably couldn't even think of why you came, what you just did, where you've been, nothing in that moment. Nothing. It just was a moment, and then it all flooded back. Ooh, what's Zenju gonna say, or whatever, came to your mind, So that is to me an altered state. We think of these things as something so dramatic because we watch a lot of TV, we read a lot of books where it's very dramatic for a lot of people, but it doesn't have to be that big, that huge, when we're talking about altered state. So it is to alter your mind, hopefully, and your heart and your spirit from the place of suffering into wisdom and compassion. When you chant the Heart Sutra, it's meant to alter you. Not why, if we're in this practice to stay the same, wow, what a waste of time to me. Wow. I'm not interested. I am not. And I don't go in trying to change either. But I do know that it does alter, from my experience of being in two different traditions. And the alteration is not like what you see in a movie. But I have to say, in Nichiren, because I was so intense in the chanting, and I was shocked of what came through was an oracle through a lucid dream. I was like, what is this? Like that something, I got so wide, so lost that something came through. And I didn't know what it was. People had to tell me what it was. And all of the readers and mediums and seers and healers came to see me when they heard about it. They wanted to affirm whether or not I was talking out the side of my neck, And, I really didn't know either. So I didn't know what was going to happen. And they were all older than me, most of them. And it was amazing what was coming through. And I knew it wasn't coming through my mind, when I was speaking with them and interacting with them. And they actually asked me to, at a bookstore, one of them said, what do you see of me? And I knew she was a big reader, a big, diviner in the city. And she said, what do you see of me? And I said, really, do you want me to say that right now? And she said, yes. And I did. I read her right there, standing right there in the bookstore. And she was like, okay. And so it was like, to me, it wasn't earth shattering or something so different. like I see on TV. And that's why I was shocked about it. I said, it's so simple. It's so regular, like just everyday common sense to me. That's how I feel when I'm doing those readings or anything. It's something I think others have, a lot of people have, but it's not cultivated in a society that looks at intelligence as the measure of one's knowing. You're not going to get that kind of affirmation. So I think I'm offering you to take a different look at and a different feel of what altered state is, and see if you yourself can find, that within practice, Buddhist practice and Zen practice. It's also, I bring it not to let's be shamans and find shamanism, but let's look at the practice as more than a tool, more than a hammer to get that nail in, more than that it's not, it doesn't, like they say, it's good for nothing. It is good for nothing. You can't use it like a hammer. You can't use it to become a perfect person, even a better person. And Suzuki Roshi say, although you may get improved, along the way, but it's just not meant for that. Because if you have those goals in mind, even to be calm, if you have all these goals in mind, it's going to be a disappointment, and you're going to suffer the practice. You are going to suffer. But if you can just come and be in a ceremony and feel that and walk away and come back and do it again and again and again, and over the years, you just keep coming and coming and coming, you're going to feel something. And I'm going to tell you, it's an altered state.
Well, can I chime in just very short?
Yeah.
That this altered state, it's in Zen, from my experience and observations, it's recognizing just what the Heart Sutra says is we are, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, we're all interrelated. And so waking up to that porousness and expanding, it's, you could talk about altered states as an expanded consciousness, that you are not separate. And so, like when Zenju was sharing the story of being able to read the other person, it was when you become so porous, there are no obstacles. And so that's what changes, is you realize you're all connected. And one thing that Zenju brings out in the book that I want to just strike that chord is that's love. When you're porous and you connect, it's all about love.
Thank you.
That is a lovely note to end on. Thank you so much. And the evening is not quite over yet. Zenju Osho is going to give a final close.
Okay.
But before that, I wanted to share a little bit about the practice of generosity that has long sustained Buddhist teachers like Zenju Osho and Buddhist communities and institutions. In classical Buddhist traditions, generosity, or dana, in the Indian languages, Pali or Sanskrit, which is etymologically connected to our English word donation, was regarded as a foundation of the Buddhist path, the very first virtue cultivated by an aspiring bodhisattva. And it's worth asking why generosity is so important for Buddhists. I think it's partly because it's a form of renunciation from objects of attachment, and also an immediate response to the needs of others. And for me personally, I find it very moving that it's generosity which has inspired teachers to teach. Our teachers are not contracted, and has supported communities and has allowed the teachings to continue from generation to generation. So Zenju Osho survives, lives on dana, as did Zenju Osho's teachers and their teachers and their teachers, all the way back to the Buddha. And it's a strange thing. We live in a capitalist society, and everybody needs health insurance, and everybody needs to pay their rent, and everybody needs clothes and food, and a teacher like Zenju Osho offers something so wonderful, and what she lives on is what people offer. And so I would not want anybody to feel pressure to give more than feels like genuinely practicing generosity. And I want you to know that this is how Zenju Osho lives. This is how she pays her health insurance and how she pays her rent. And I think it's important to name that this is what allows her to continue to do what she does. And we all value that deeply. So if maybe some of you already made an offering when you registered, but you'll be receiving, and I'm grateful for that, thank you. You'll be receiving an email link from BCBS, which includes a link to offer Dana and also a link to fill out a survey if there was anything that, any thoughts you might have that would be helpful for us. And if you look in the chat, Cassie just put the link to the Dana and the link to the survey in the chat now, if you'd like to do that now. So thank you so much, Paula and Zenju Osho. I deeply appreciate all that you shared. And Zenju Osho, maybe you could bring the evening to closure.
All right, thank you. I just invite you to breathe normally. Just do the breathing that you do. And invoke the breath. May I come back to this body. May I come back to this breath. May I come to know this body as the earth itself. May I breathe myself back home. And once again, be introduced to this great life. May the great light of this earth surround me. May I be released from past harm and impose hatred. May I come to recognize my existence and the true nature of life. May I come back to this breath, to this body, as a sacred place in which I remain awake and connected to the fragrance and taste of liberation. May I remain visible on the path of spirit and be seen and heard. May love given be returned tenfold. May awakening be known in this body at this time. And when I can't breathe, may I breathe in the next moment. May I say, I can breathe. I Can Breathe is in the book, back of the book. Written for Eric Donner, who was killed by the police. Thank you.
Thank you, Zenju.
And everyone.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us. Being in your presence, Zenju, makes the air taste sweeter. Thank you.
Okay. It was fun being with you. You have the same energy I have, so it really was a match, which I knew. Yeah, thank you. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely sisters in the Dharma.
Yes.
So, let's see. Does it anywhere?
A lot of gratitude being expressed
Okay.
in the,
Yeah.
queue.
Okay, in the queue. Okay. Yeah, looking at them. Okay. Great.
Maybe sometime in June, it'd be great to have another conversation.
Okay. Yeah, that would be a good time for me too, about June, end of June. So,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. Okay, sounds good. All right. We can go now?
I think we can go now.
All right.
Oh.
Okay, thanks so much.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Paula. Thank you so much, Zenju.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.